Hey guys, Scott Fresener here with the T-shirt report with my good friend Richard Greaves, and this is episode number 6. We're still doing this thing. Hey, what's the shirt behind you now? It looks like an Indian thing. No, it's
The
giraffes.
shirt behind me it's from Harlequin Nature Graphics, probably printed in 1985 when I did some consulting work for Harlequin Nature Graphics. They're the ones that brought me the Jimmy Buffett Caribbean Soul work that I really made my full color process reputation with in the early 80s. And when Shadow closed up, I did some consulting work. So I didn't actually print that one, but it's in the collection, 1985.
Wasn't Jeff Baxter working then there? I thought he worked for Harlequin.
He came about a year and a half after. He was always a much better, shall we say, a friend. He really was a friend to Michael Latona, who was the head guy at Harlequin Nature Graphics in Fort Myers, Florida. A great company, great art.
I just knew Jeff had worked there and stuff. Hey, this show is going to be all about, this is our special edition, breaking news, right? All about the Atlantic City ISS show. You went to it. I stayed home and was drinking margaritas by the pool, and you were back there working the aisle, and you came back, I think, pumped up. So this year, ISS co-located with PPAI, which is promotional products and stuff. So my guess is a lot of the ISS exhibitors had to deal with crossover people who probably had no interest but nowhere to go sometimes. I mean, I think you find that on crossover shows. But what do you know about the PPAI?
PPAI is a non-function trade association, and it has actual members who are the suppliers and distributors of promotional products. They cover all promotional products. Now, the question that people ask me that had never heard of PPAI is, what about ASI? Well, ASI is an industry supplier because it sells its services and is a for-profit group, whereas the PPAI is a non-profit trade association. Now, ASI is actually a member of PPAI, and they actually exhibit at the PPAI-sponsored trade shows.
I thought they were mortal enemies, but maybe that was years ago.
Well,
PPAI came out.
There are actually quite a few of those groups, and I learned screen printing in an ASI company, Eater Manufacturing, and I'd never really heard of them up until the last maybe couple of years. But they really are not very screen printing oriented. So what happens is that you do get people that are part of the PPAI side of the show. They're commingled together, just like ISS commingled with FESPA 2 or 3, 4 years ago down in Florida. That was a pretty interesting show also, but first time FESPA had come to North America. They go to Mexico now. What this means is that you get a lot of people that are salespeople for promotional products, but screen printing, vinyl, embroidery, DTG printing, especially the big gigantic machines. They're fascinated, but they don't know what from what. So there's a lot of, this is a squeegee, or they see the squeegee material at the Sati booth and they go, what's this?
They have no buying power and they have no interest in buying something probably. But they're getting probably like the magic show where SGI was there. We talked about that, where people are getting educated and you're helping perform a service. But you're right. I always found when there was crossover co-located shows, you get the people that didn't need to be there.
Now, I spent 2 hours a day at the Ink Kitchen booth, which is Tom Davenport and Rick Roth's free information blog for screen printers. Rick Roth, who was at the show, I'll talk about that later, but Rick Roth would literally stop people in the aisle. And he had his big know-it-all sweatshirt on, and he would say, "What are you doing here?" And so many of these people did not freak and run away because he's smiling in his fun way, but people seemed to get it. I was really surprised after a while I was getting into it myself, but what are you doing here? And he says, I'm lost. I said, well, you came to the right place. And he would hand out his Ink Kitchen card. He'd steer them over, show them the Mac computer with his blog on it. Then he would carry them, walk them over and show them the mask tape high density print that he's so famous for, which is now like 20, 25 years old, but also a three-dimensional, a 3D, you had to put the glasses on, but a 3D image that, it was perfect almost every time. He'd swoop them up, get them in, show them the things, and they would leave knowing with one of his cards.
Work in the booth, work in the room. That's smart.
Work in the room.
Yeah, I love it. So what was the biggest thing you saw there? I mean, there must be something that really knocked you.
Before I go to the big thing,
Right.
that's the tease for the commercial. My old pal, Jeffrey Gittimer, who I had Shadow Graphics with in the early 80s, he was the keynote speaker at the PPAI special dinner, which every member... right, but every person that came to the show, including the ISS people, if you had a badge, you got a free drink, and you could come to the keynote for free. I don't know anybody who even know that it happened, including myself. Jeff Baxter told me, Jeff Baxter of M&R, told me later on, I hear Jeffrey was here yesterday. What? I reach into my pocket, I called Jeffrey, and he answers the phone with, I've already left. I'm on my way to the Reading Terminal Market.
Call me and tell me you're in town. He went to get the White House to get a sub. He's left the room.
He didn't go to the White. He left Atlantic City and went to the Reading Terminal Market and went to his favorite spot. So I haven't seen him since last May. I would have loved to have gone. I would have gone to the thing. I would have lassoed everybody in. So
but you think it was a best kept secret? You think it was just one of those things that it was maybe the PPAI guys knew, but I find it shows sometimes you don't even know about the parties or about the stuff like that.
You go to this thing, and, one picture near the entrance. Hello. So maybe it had to be that I never opened a PPAI brochure.
Yeah.
But yes, when I got home, I looked it up, and yes, it's a big thing all over. If you go Jeffrey Gittimer PPAI, it was announced on many, many other web pages. And just that I and nobody I know knew that he was giving a speech at all. Okay.
That's so funny.
Let's move on.
Okay, so with bated breath, I'm asking you, what was the big thing at the show? What knocked your socks off?
No question. The Vastec C1000 semi-automatic coder.
You think that Mark sat at lunch with his wife, and they thought, what do we call it? Let's call it the C1000. That rolls off our tongue. But,
I think what's more important is that I've been in this business for 30, 35 years. I don't know. I'm sure you're not that old. Who'd have thought that the most interesting things that I've seen in the last 6 months at shows were from Brown Manufacturing and Vastex.
Did you actually say that? No, I agree. But it's great.
I am madly in love with the Firefly. I don't think it's for everybody. It was there. I didn't actually go see it again at the show, although I only live 2 hours away from Brown. I can go see it. But it takes a lot of electricity. But for the new desktop, the DTG direct-to-garment printers that are printing on complicated polyester fibers, I think the Firefly is going to change the world. But when Mark Vasilantone showed me the coder, and it was in the last 20 minutes of the show, I stopped by just to say hello and ask about other things completely. And he said, Richard, you got to see this. Okay, another rack. You had a nice rack last year. I saw it, but I just fell in love with it. I love it. It's a screen holder like the one that I showed at the SJI, or I don't remember which of the reports that I've done, but it's a screen holder that moves down with a foot pedal. You hold the coder still in both hands where it's comfortable. No arm control, variables to, you just have to keep pressure.
Keep it from dripping.
And hold it still. Yeah. No holding one hand on the top of a screen and one hand with the drippy thing. There's actually a cute little shelf at the top where you can put the wet coder so that you can switch the screens and flip them around. The screen goes down at a controlled speed, but then goes zip up when you press the up button. And then it comes down again at whatever controlled speed you want, and it goes zip up.
And the level of the emulsion in the trough. Many people think it has to do with how hard you push the trough against the screen. That means absolutely nothing. So what we did was we found a hole in the product that's available for screen coding, because most people are doing this. Very inconsistent speed angle, the way they're holding the angle, and when they get to a certain point, sometimes they're even shaking. Very bad. So for that, we developed a semi-automatic screen coder, which will be affordable by most manual screen printing companies, where they can set the scoop coder.
That's cool.
You're holding the scoop coder where it's comfortable for you, whether you're 5 feet tall or 6 feet tall, you hold it where it's most comfortable for you. It'll hold up to a 36-inch screen, 25 by 36.
Oh, next level shirts, they got beautiful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Next level, don't look at it.
It's only $1,400. I know that Tetco used to sell racks for coding. The one that we had in the Orlando laboratory, that was a $900 rack just for the rack. So I think that is going to be a big change for people that are doing direct coding. Yes, you're going to have to pay $1,400, but this is going to smooth out your coding. It is going to make screen making a much easier job. It is a semi-automatic press. It's going to be terrific, and I can't wait till they get out into the field. There's only one, the prototype that Mark showed me, and I'm in love with it. No shaky arms.
Why didn't you think of that 20 years ago? Why didn't I think of it 20 years ago? You know.
Everybody that's going to see it, they're going to go, oh, that's so simple.
Yeah.
I think we've all focused on something that actually held the coders.
Yeah.
MR made one 20 years ago. Majestic distributed one that came from Australia, and they've just been around. This is just so much nicer.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've all focused on making something or seeing the ones that were out in the market that were very pricey, that held the coder, and it was hands-off practically. And this is smart. I was blown away. I saw it before you told me you saw it. I saw it on a Facebook post. I'm going, are you kidding me? You know, so
right.
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, we'll see.
The Facebook post is Douglas Grieger doing it, and the scene that I showed you is Mark Vasilantone actually pretending to code on his own.
Do you think Mark was ever a screener? you look at the sons, the brown kids. You know, Mark, who's second generation. You wonder what their chops are. You know.
Mark ran away from home and became an automation engineer for I think 20 years, until his parents wanted to get rid of the company, and he got called back in.
I don't think I knew that, actually. I knew he was gone for a long time. I'd see him occasionally working a booth when he had a beard and younger, just working the booth, but not working for the company. And then he went away, and so that's interesting. All right, that's the highlight of the show.
His mother told me about stories about him being around the shop or sitting on a stack full of shirts, and then he went off to college and learned, automated engineering.
Perfect.
So, who'd have thunk it?
Perfect.
Well, this is not rocket scientist. This is just why didn't I think of it?
You know, before we move on, to throw a bone back to Mark at Vastex, we use Vastex in our classes, and you know, I don't know why, and we're going to talk later on about who did the first auto and stuff, but I always saw it of Vastex as being lightweight and flimsy in my early years. But man alive, their stuff is rock solid. I'm telling you, Mark has done a great job, because their stuff is, I mean, we take it into the classroom, and, you know, Mike and I are trying to hoist this 600-pound, 6-color, 6-patient press. It is all steel. It is rock solid. I mean, these guys, I'm telling you, I'm not blowing smoke, you know, but these guys have really got it nailed. They've got it down, and Mark has brought a lot to the table over the years. And I think the people that have not looked at Vastex, that maybe just think it's different because it's got a lot of stuff going on. You know, every press has lots of parts. Stuff is rock solid. I'm telling you what, they make really good stuff. So moving right along, you told me a funny story, something else we're going to talk about right now that you saw that I have an opinion about, but.
Isn't that why people are tuning in to hear us?
I don't know. Maybe not.
With our opinions?
Yeah. Anyway, so what else did you see that was?
So at the MHM booth, I went to go look at the new X-Type. There had some innovations or something, and they were showing that they had new heads. They aren't that much different. The X type is what they had at the show, which is a $60,000 printer. It's a very, very nice machine. But what was new and different was the new tablet that can run the machine. They're using a Samsung, I think it's probably a 10-inch tablet that can be unplugged and you can walk around the press. Now, I don't know if that's actually new. I know that I love the idea of the Workhorse Sabre, and they had a Dell tablet that could run the machine. But they told me at the booth, Gavin mentioned that you could unplug it and you could use it to walk around the press. It's cool. And
that.
if you drop
I love that idea. Must be Bluetooth, I'm guessing, and just within a range.
it would I wouldn't want you to move it too far away. Now, what was interesting is that that's only the second screen, because behind it is one of those industrial in a metal box screens that everybody's got. So if you drop the Samsung tablet, you can always go down to whatever big box store. They were keeping mentioning Best Buy. Go to Best Buy. $200. I think it's more than $200, but $200 you can buy another tablet, plug it in, and it will work as soon as you download the app. But this is where tablets are taking us. It's so exciting.
I love that whole thing.
Now, I think the real purpose was to tie the MHM X-type automatic press with the Kornit Paradigm 2, which is an add-on direct-to-garment printer. This one costs around $150,000, but it can do 200 shirts an hour.
We've talked about this. Show me the money. Let me see that machine do. Was it actually? I think we talked before. Was this Paradigm printing at the show?
I don't know if it was printing at the show. I actually was literally, it was in the last 5 minutes of the show. The show was probably closed when I was leaving, and I wanted to cover the MHM booth, so I didn't see it running.
They've shown it before that way, but I've never seen it really printing. And you and I have joked about it. Why put $150,000 DTG on a press that the MHM would probably do on a good day, $500 or $600 an hour on a slow production day? I'm just thinking, and put a machine like that on. I don't get it at all.
Well, I think the logic is like the Macchi, the Italian Macchi press that you and I have talked about in the past. In 2007, I saw in Berlin,
I did too.
Macchi had a manual press that had an Epson-style direct-to-garment machine on one head. Now, that's something that's only, how wide is a 1430? It's like 24 inches wide, and it worked pretty nice. And you'd print a white underbase, flash it, and run it underneath. And you could run a little bit, certainly faster than pre-treating a black shirt, then printing a white underbase, flashing,
right,
and then printing while it's taking the, how long does it usually take to print a black print? Like 45 seconds to 90 seconds to do the final print job?
Yeah, maybe longer. Like for the colors on a shirt, you could do it probably in a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Okay. But still, it just seems like I don't know.
The Kornits are known to be fast. So what they do is when you take a Kornit Paradigm 2 and you put it on, you're really turning this terrific X-type automatic printer into a pre-treatment and flashing machine. So it's almost an add-on. The press is an add-on to the Kornit. You could also not run the Kornit, but that seems like that would be a scandal.
I think it's premature. I thought it was premature when they showed it 7 or 8 years ago. I still think it's premature. But I think that you're going to someday see lots of those multiple paradigms at multiple stations. Then you're going to get speed. But I think they have one. It always seemed wrong to me. But that's just maybe I'm off. But because see, Kornit, and I like the guys at Kornit. They were always respectful of me. They've always been very friendly. Give me the time of day. I like those guys. But when they advertise these numbers, if you go by their booth and watch them printing, and you put your watch to it, and you're going, this is not the same as what's advertised. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think they're getting the rates that they're talking about, unless you're doing a little tiny, narrow print. So anyway, so we'll see how it shakes out. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff coming down the pike in the next few years on DTG, stuff that I worked on years ago, but I think I was way ahead of my time because now people are all going to be coming out with high-end stuff.
When I worked for Joe Clark at M&R in 1993, one of the secret projects we did work on was an inkjet before inkjets were what they are now. That's 1993. We'd seen at Print 90 that we'd seen individual data applications, or variable data combinations where they were printing an individual picture and a name on individual Coca-Cola cans. And we worked on an experiment to try and do individual name drops as the last color, or any sort of an individual, for instance, like the name of a person, like on a football jersey, as an add-on to a regular M&R 6 or 8 color press. So that was 1993. Inkjets were so slow and so clumsy, and we couldn't get it to work with any class of a textile ink or anything that would work. But we've been trying to do that for an awful long time. What I see as a stepping stone is that you have the new, much faster curing inks that work in the Ricoh Generation 5 head. So you've got things like the Belket, what is it called? The Genesis machine. M&R's got their $40,000 M-Link. The Genesis machine is like $30,000. I think they advertise it less than $30,000. And when Rich Hoffman talked to me about the M-Link, it was like $40,000. And this does, or supposedly does, 200 an hour with the attached MHM press. So that's $200,000 maybe for 200 an hour. And the Aeon, I'm forgetting how to pronounce that.
I think it's Aeon. Yeah.
Aeon, the 400 per hour costs about $400,000. So should we really buy 4 M-Links or 2 other machines? I'm not a DT expert, but it's just the questions that we should be able to take to those people later on when we go to the next show.
It's a tough one. You watch like the Paradigm print. It's been a long time since I've seen a print, but let's say 200 an hour. That's going to be then, what's that? 4 1/3 shirts a minute. And you watch them print, and it's over a minute of print. Maybe I'm wrong. Now the Aeon uses the Kyocera head, which is a big head and high resolution, and just pumps ink out like water. And so I could see those guys with the 400 an hour. I believe that, but maybe I'm wrong. But I'm just giving you my opinion, that I think that sometimes there's still the technology. The technology is there, by the way, because Aeon's got it right. They have $400,000 for the machine, but the machine is there. You could build a machine like that will do the high volume, but some of these guys are still using old. Everybody's using scanning technology. The head moves back and forth. When I always felt, and Michael Fresener, we always felt that the way to do it was with a array head. Lots of heads that don't move. Now that's so that now you get seconds for a print, but it costs you $500,000 for the machine. But we'll see how things shake out. We were actually working before U.S. Screen Closed on an array head machine. We had the drawings done, and we were working on it. We felt we could build it, but we didn't have enough money to build it. But an array means the head just sits there. Spits out ink, and the shirt moves, and you go, boom, there's a print. Boom, there's a print, and so anyway, I know me rambling on it, but I thought it would have done that. We would have all seen that by now, but everybody wants to go back and forth still, so we'll see. We'll have to report. We'll see what SGIA shakes out. You told me when you called me after the show that you and Rich Hoffman were now like this. You were tight. So you were by the M&R booth, though. What's new with M&R?
Well, no, we had dinner at the shirt board dinner, and he came and I sat next to him, so we were like that.
That's great. Oh, there's nobody sitting next to Rich Hoffman. I think I'll sit there. No, you and Rich have history anyway. You guys go back. Well, you said you were back in 1993 working with Joe Clark. I even forgot that Joe was ever president of M&R, which was a long time ago.
Well, before Rich Hoffman was the biggest manufacturer of screen printing equipment in the world, he started out working for his father, who was the electrical contractor or the electrician at the Advance factories in Chicago. And Rich was a service tech. And
but hang on. Before that, he was just like an electrical maintenance. Helping fix electrical stuff, or he was working in the factory.
I misspoke. Rich's father.
Yeah.
Worked at Advance and was in charge of electricity, or electrician.
Right.
I may be insulting the Hoffman family, but that's who I knew.
Yeah.
But when Rich came up, when he got a job at Advance, he came up as a technician. And I told the story. It was 1 year ago that he told the story at the shirtboard dinner at Angelo's, that his very first tech call ever as an Advance rep was to come and fix my equipment because I was complaining that the brushes were, the motors were burning out. And then he discovered that I had been turning up the potentiometers, not to 90 volts where they should be, but to 110 until the motors, I could make the motors go faster.
We need more power. We need more power, Richie.
He knew more about how motors ran than I did, and he said, no. And he was always a big guy, and I remember looming over and sort of shaking me his head, and later telling me the story that was his very first.
Yeah, no, he wasn't.
He was different from the other advanced repair guys. And I remember that I always then afterwards, I want Rich Hoffman. I want Rich Hoffman to come and fix my equipment.
So
and almost always he was available. And
so you have a lot of history with him. That's great.
Later when I'm saying, I'd like to write the manuals for M&R. That's how I got some of my consulting work for them. He never hired me. Joe Clark hired me to work there. He probably remembers me as that guy who made trouble for him when he was a tech. He's always been a terrific guy for me. Yeah.
Always friendly guy. There's a guy that works the forums. Look at him at this dinner. He could be going out somewhere else, but rather than hanging with screeners, he could be going out and gambling or whatever. But Rich, to me, he told me, although when he used to work my forums, the U.S. screen print forums.
Okay.
Work him meaning he would go and answer questions. And he told me once, he says, you have no idea how much business I get, him, from just being on your forum, Scott. Rich owes me, by the way, because he told for years, he was the guy, I'm Rich Hoffman, I'm M&R, and if you have a problem, let me know. I'm the owner, and more power to him. He got it. He understood that kind of marketing, way before a lot of us got it. So anyway, what else is new with M&R?
Well, I talked to Alec Mimoser, who has been teasing me about the new return on investment for screen making, the screen room ROI is I think what they're going to call it. And it's been teased. He promises me by the time this comes out that it will be available for everybody to review. I've always been a big guy in working on, I've always been very interested in working on return on investment and the time studies, cycle times. The only other person that has really grasped that I've known is Greg Kitson. Mm-hmm. He took it way beyond the stuff that I was doing, but I was always doing time studies. I got exposed to fabric cutting and sewing manufacturing time studies when I worked in North Carolina in the factory, in the sewing house that I worked at Carolina Pacific in 1982. So Rich Hoffman also at that dinner was talking about the break-even or the payback point for his new, very expensive $170,000 setup where you get a Starlight and a direct-to-screen imaging system and a washout thing. Costs about $170,000. But if you have enough volume, I forget what the break-even number is, so maybe I shouldn't have started to talk about this, but it will literally pay for itself in the first year. After that, that's $100,000 you're putting in your pocket every year. It's like solar energy. It's like CFL bulbs. It's like anything that pays for itself. Automated screen making equipment for larger shops. You've got to have the volume to afford it. But I'm in love with the idea.
You think you think the ROI will be on their website? What are they going to do? Make it like a spreadsheet or app or something?
It's supposed to be a selling tool. I'm hoping that they've got engineers that can do it in JavaScript, and it'll just be a web page that you'll punch your numbers in.
Yeah.
At the Saudi booth, I've been a Saudi fan for a long time. I talked with Ben Petsy, and we got into a discussion about how long I'd actually been in love with or have used thin thread mesh. I was exposed in Australia to either a SATI or a SAFAR mesh that was incredibly thin. They used to send meshes when they were in early production to Australia because it was a closed knit place. They weren't going to send it to the United States because they couldn't supply the entire United States. So that was when I first started to get exposed to it. And it was somebody down in Australia that told me that Well, no, this is a filtration mesh that we discovered, and we started to use it for printing adhesives. And I thought, oh, that sounds like something I'd like to do, because originally white ink was called flock adhesive, and it just worked in my mind. And I would comb through the mesh charts to look for the thinnest thread and the best combination. Now, when I used to break mesh, when I worked for Stretch Devices back in 1986, I worked for Stretch Devices, and Rick Appleton and I, in our spare time, or when there was, we did this a lot to make tension chart number 9 for Mr. Newman, that we would push mesh until it would actually snap. And this is a great place for me to learn, because we broke every mesh you can possibly imagine. And thin meshes can be entirely strong. They can be stronger than you can imagine, except you've got to have a lot of threads. And this is where I learned about 255 mesh. Every vinyl or glass printer always was in love with 255. Why? Because you had the most number of fibers to hold threads to hold a stencil, but it also had the best open area. And mesh got stronger as you went to 305 and 330 and 355, but you didn't get as much ink to go through. The ink really went through the 355. It also got worse. You didn't get as much ink flow through the lower meshes, 200, 180, or 160, and so on. When you think about what we were trying to push through 60 monofilament mesh, or 110, as Jeff Proctor has said, the Model T of the T-shirt printing industry. Now, that it was those heavy fibers that people wanted something thick and heavy, but it's probably because they weren't really using a lot of that mesh for printing. It was more of a filtration mesh or something. Who knows how it all came about? But when I discovered the 8376 mesh, 83 thread count to 76 micron, these were the cool meshes that had thin fibers. Now, they could also be very dangerous, especially for a guy like me that loved to take things up to higher and higher tensions. Joe Clark has always written, and I'm quoting him, so I mention his name, that if you choose the wrong mesh, it doesn't really matter what ink, when he sold ink, or when he sold squeegee blades, that the wrong mesh and the wrong blade and the wrong ink, you really can't get that to print. Unless, of course, you want to hit it 2 or 3 or 4 times. So I've always gone to thinner threads because everything flows through it. It gives you a thinner deposit, but you don't drive it into the shirt by bending the blade or angling the blade so much. I have to take a breath now. But another cool thing that I saw was Ross Balfour, who I've mentioned in several of these things. Ross Balfour had a Seek Thermal, that's the brand name, S-E-E-K, thermal infrared camera that attached onto his smartphone. He uses an iPhone, but it also works on the USB port of a Samsung smartphone. He thought it was only $149, but it turned out it was $249. But it was like the Predator movies. He could aim it at people, and you'd see red legs, you'd see their body, and you could certainly see the shirt. So for the gadget guy, I got to have one. I don't think that shop owners should buy one, because you should get a real infrared imaging camera. But for only $249, you can get something and really learn. The boss should have one to double check or to really calibrate equipment. Just for the cool factor, I think every rep that works with inks should actually buy one.
Next show, you're going to have one and tell us how it works, right?
$250. I wish I went into more shops these days.
Amazon probably has it, don't you think?
Amazon has it for you. You can go to the website is thermal.com. They've also got they sell 2 items. They sell the regular and they sell the extended distance version, which is a little bit more money for iOS, for iPhones, and for Android.
Good.
The other thing that I asked Ben Petsy about was I want to get his father, Al Petsy, who still answers the phone for Sati, to sign my fresh copy of Joe Clark's Control Without Confusion. I have one book. The plastic was literally falling off this one. And so this, I don't think it's, I'm sure that it's been fanned, but this is an untouched copy of Control Without Confusion.
That book's still in print? I wonder if SC's still selling it. Didn't SC?
No.
Yeah.
No, I scanned it.
You have it on a
Gosh,
PDF, probably.
Have it on a PDF. If you want a copy, definitely email me and I'll send you a copy of Joe Clark's Control Without Confusion, a must book for printing automatic textile printing. There's no other book.
Yeah. When did he write that? Like 20 years ago? I'm just thinking about how long ago it was.
He wrote it in 9 sections.
Oh, it was articles.
They were sections in Screen Printing Magazine.
Yeah.
And I think I told this story on this show before too, that Joe told us all he gathered together Jack Kassane, who had a skimmers line. That was the name of his fabric. And so chapter 1 was about fabric. Chapter 2 was about art. I wrote the chapter 2. Joe, of course, added a few things, and I don't mean to demean what Joe wrote, but I wrote the chapter number 2. And then it was Fred Clark, the great Grandmaster Fred Clark, wrote chapter 3. Al Petsy wrote a chapter. Don Newman didn't really write chapter as much as I wrote chapter 5, I think, for the new roller frame. Who wrote the mesh chapter? Joe, of course, wrote the ink chapter. Jeff Baxter wrote the printing press factor, and Joe wrote the Moray chapter that was only in the actual book. It wasn't in the magazine. We were all supposed to get a little piece of the action.
How'd that work
Joe
out?
How'd
that work out?
I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
We're all gee, Rich, that didn't.
Joe, if you're watching this show.
Yep.
Richard needs dinner.
What are you going to do, fire me?
Yeah, that's so funny. It's a great story. I had no idea that different people wrote all that.
I've got, there's a, it says at the end of the chapter, it says, I'd like to thank the Philadelphia College of Textiles and Jack Kassane as the technical advisor on part number 1.
That's funny. Oh, God.
I forgot to mention Marc Coudray. The actual shirt that we used as an example throughout the entire book was printed by Marc Coudray. It's a job that he got in, I think, overnight. He tells the humorous story that he had to get them out. He did the separations. He got the separations for Fred Clark, made the screens, printed 2,000 shirts, and shipped the shirts off. It was a regular printing run, which was magic in the early 80s. 1985, full color process was definitely a voodoo art. There were, I'm proud to say I was one of those guys that were Fred Clark disciples, and I made my name printing full color process.
You did. I don't think people that today would know that, but you had the history. Mark had the history. Fred Clark, who's of course rest in peace. He was the guy, and it's all now in Photoshop. Push a button.
Jerry Claus was a great great full color process printer, and of course the great Bill Wayner, who lives down in Louisiana. And Bill Wayner did it on a precision. At the Albatross booth, I stopped and talked to Barry Braidman, and we were showing some people about the vacuum. I love the vacuum machine that nobody ever seems to want to use. They try and shoot over a coffee can, or they may try and make their own. I know one shop that I went into, they do it up against a window, and of course the window has been pebbled by the overspray of the airless spray guns that we use to remove plastisol, and that window is damaged and gone forever. Mostly we're talking about replacement parts and stuff like that, and one guy said something like, hey, my machines only last 3 months, and I got to get spare parts, or I dropped the nozzle. And Barry was very clear. He says, hey, we've got all the parts that you might need. We got diagrams, but the real problem is that you're neglecting to daily maintain your machine. You're not emptying it and bleeding it every day, and you're not lubricating it. After I worked at Eder Manufacturing, I went to work at an actual sewing factory down in North Carolina, Carolina Pacific. And there's where I learned from the guys that were masters of the spray out gun, because the sewing ladies have guns to remove oil. They've got guns, well, it's the same gun, but they've got different chemicals to remove oil, to remove blood. Blood, yes, you don't want any blood on that nice Ralph Lauren shirt that you're just buying.
Never thought about that, though. I guess it makes sense, though.
They had a guy, when you've got maybe 10 of those guns all around a 600 sewing machine factory, there's a guy that, every night he'd be cleaning it out. And so he would, go through the steps, which are listed on the YouTube video of the, what number is it? It's the Expert 1000 cleaning gun. I'll have a I'll have the link in the show notes. If you go to the YouTube video, you'll see the step-by-step. All you have to do is, you remove all the liquid, you remove the stem, and you put some air tool oil in it. I used to use Marvel Mystery Oil, which is what we had for all the air tools that I had at my home shop, which was quite extensive when I lived with my parents. Now, think about this, troops. Solvents that attack oily plastisol or oily oil or blood, they will also attack the oil inside the gun. Also think it's a gun. Take all the bullets out of it, take all the solvent out of it, and clean it, and then oil it before you put it away every night, and it will last forever. My guns would last for years, and it would be something mechanical. It would be a piston or something that had to be rebuilt, and I always was rotating, one. I always had a spare. So go to the video and be nicer to your clean out gun. Believe me, it's your best friend.
But let me ask you a question. Now this is loaded, of course. When you were at Coastal Printworks, did you clean your gun every day?
I didn't.
But did somebody? I mean, I'm just curious because
I'd have to say I don't remember. I'm sure that I explained it to him. I know that it was interesting. Coastal Printworks was only about 6 miles away from Expert, and so we were very friendly when we needed to get the gun rebuilt, and when we needed an extra gun.
Yeah.
When I needed an extra gun once, when we made a mistake that had to be blown up by a lot of people, we went and bought 2 quick guns, or we went quick down.
Were you blowing out? Were you blowing out prints, or was it a big mistake? Were you blowing out prints?
Well, I think I told the story on this report also that I made a mistake on the Harley Davidson, not a Harley Davidson, but the Hells Angels of Los Angeles fun run, where they came into the shop and said, print it just like last time. Well, last time was 1995, and this time is 1996. And so I didn't know any better. I was new there. I said, okay, we'll print it just like we did next time with 1995. And when the Hells Angels people came to pick up their bandanas.
It's the wrong year? Oh, my God. No,
it's
you
the
didn't
wrong
tell
year.
the story. You didn't tell the story.
So,
okay, well, a bandana would probably shoot out easier than a shirt. I'm thinking if you were.
They were bandanas.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went out and I delivered it. The look on this very scary guy, but he was a sweetheart. He goes, no, let's not be casting aspersions on my friends riding Milwaukee, Wisconsin Harley Davidsons.
Okay, all right, yes, all right.
I can't imagine. I have 2 Harley Davidson Hells Angels stories. One is at Eater, where we printed on leather jackets, and it was for the Harley Davidson Club of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And, about a month or so later, a couple of, scary-looking guys came in, and they said, hey, we're not really very happy with the jackets. The ink is coming off. And they call me down from the 3rd floor so I can deal with them. And I go out, I look at the jacket, and I just say, yeah, guys, I understand. What's happening? Well, and we lean up against the clubhouse, and, and I'm 5'7", and I weighed about 130 pounds in 1981. And I said, well, what happens when you lean your motorcycle against the concrete wall of your clubhouse? What happens to the gas tank? I guess we better order some more jackets. So the very same thing.
Guy named Rocky saying that to you. So
the exact same thing happened, except this was different. I had screwed it up, but the guy recognized that he'd screwed it up. He said, and I said, "What can we do about this? Can you fix this?" And he split the cost of a lot of the stuff, and we had to blow out the single number. So I'm forgetting if it was a 5 or 6 or 7. Yeah. And then the manual printer, a very sharp guy, I've forgotten who his name was, he lined up each one, and we used a screen with very clear emulsion on it, and he would line it up, he'd drop it into place, he'd line it up, drop it that last final ½ inch, and print the one number. And I think we only had to blow out maybe 3. So he printed 1,000 black bandanas, and he hit the mark 997 times with silver ink, and he did it in 2 days. They came and picked it up, and muscular dystrophy was all the better for it. And they came back and did more work with us. But, Yes, that walk downstairs is always scary when it's the Hells Angels.
And let's talk about something a little more pleasant.
All right, let's talk about tech support of Pittsburgh. I like those people, and I like their stand was a very popular place for me. I hung out a lot with the people that were there. Bill Rediker was actually talking to a few people because they recently broke up with SRock, leaving Ryanet to be the only service in the United States. I actually met the person whose name coincidentally starts with Ryan. His name is Ryan. I'm sorry, Ryan, I've forgotten your last name. He actually came to the shirt board dinner, and I sat next to his wife during, we had several conversations. His nice, enduring wife who doesn't like to come to screen printing conventions, but she came to Angela's for the big dinner. So I know people were asking a lot, who's going to do the tech service, or how's the tech service going to be, because they bought their SRock from tech support. But Workhorse and the Workhorse Saber, which I do like a lot, was in that booth. The real reason I spent most of my time there was that Alan Howe works there, and he's a good friend, but also because Joe Hopkins, the trade agent for Permaset, which of course made in Australia, he was in that booth with a very nice display. I'm showing pictures of it right now. But he also had with him the managing director of Colormaker, the parent company that makes Permaset water-based inks. David Stewart was there. David is actually a real honest-to-goodness chemist, and he had an excellent discussion. He and I had an excellent discussion of the organic nature, or why water-based inks can be safe, or sometimes they can't be safe, how you prove it. And I just enjoyed talking to him a lot. I asked him to be on our netcast, and he went back to Australia. But someday soon we'll have an interview with David Stewart, a color maker. Now,
but you think that they're comparable to the virus inks? I mean, you've seen the samples, kind of close up and live and in person. You think that it's a similar look?
It's just so hard for me to say. I couldn't I didn't have a chance to really ask the hard questions like what is the pigment content. And yes, I would love to do some side-by-side examples. I know that I trust Joe Hopkins more than anything else. I quizzed him about, Joe Hopkins has on his business card, trade agent. I wonder I don't know what that actually means, but I know Joe is the only guy in the United States that represents represents Permaset in the United States. But I know the colors are terrific. But when I get an explanation, the explanations did sound a little bit like Apple computer presentations, in which this is the brightest ink we've ever seen. This is the softest that we've ever seen. And then I'd say, oh, who are you comparing that to, or what are you brighter by? And David Stewart would say, I don't really compare our inks to other people's inks. So it didn't really close the loop. I don't want to embarrass.
I hate that kind of a response. I'm sorry.
Well, he's a chemist.
Yeah.
And it's my job as a reviewer, or it's my job as a screen printer, and I should do a better job of comparing these things. I've always been excited about water-based ink. Charlie Leach from Pavonine. I loved everything I got from Pavonine. Mort Taylor, the master of water-based, the Manukian pigments, the Italian pigments I used to get when I was doing work for Walt Disney, and I could make the softest reds and blacks you can imagine for Mickey and Minnie Mouse. But, talking about soft hand, Scott will show pictures of these sleeve covers, these things that go over your sleeves that are made out of nylon.
The tattoos.
Excellent, excellent, easy printing, but you couldn't feel it. All the shirts that I've shown that are being displayed while we're talking, because you'd rather look at these pictures than look at me, they're all soft as can be. A couple of these have been made by Mark Gervais at, Ningbo in China. Ningbo Knitting. I should know that better, how to pronounce that. Ningbo Knitting. But some of the shirts, Joe Hopkins was telling me that his wife put the guitar shirt that I'm showing in the bleach. It's been bleached. You can see how the black of the shirt is completely different, but the colors of the print are perfect, and there's no textile feel to it at all. You cannot feel the ink. I love water-based ink. I always have, ever since Terry Kaiserman at Custom Color came into the Carolina Pacific shop, and I met him for the very first time.
With hair.
And he taught me more about water. Oh yeah, with lots of hair.
Lots of hair.
Terry Kaiserman.
But do you think people are buying this? I mean, TechSource is selling it, and Bill has a good following on the East Coast because of his time with Wildside, and he's always been that kind of an open guy. But do you think people are buying the ink? I mean, I know that they're in the booth showing it, but do you think they're making a lot of sales?
Well, I think that both Jesse Martinez at Matsui and Joe Hopkins, they've only been on an industrial level really distributing the ink and finding bigger quantities, because you could always get Permaset in the nice little tiny half of a pint, whatever. You know, when I go to Michael's and I buy ink for printing on cardboard, you know, it costs me $9 for this tiny little 8-ounce jar. And
they like that business. Yeah, that's a good business. Yeah,
right.
A nickel worth of ink.
We're seeing real, honest to goodness, good containers, and water-based ink it should be cheaper because it is less expensive to make.
I wonder if they're laying a lot of groundwork. I mean, I'm just thinking that if I was that kind of a company and I knew that water-based was the topic of the month, I'd probably be really working the booth and really showing it to lay the groundwork for the printers who don't ever print with it, who have tried it and it clogged the screen broke down, and you know, I think they have to do some, which Charlie Leach tried to do 20, 30 years ago, tried to convert the industry, and nobody wanted to hear about it, and unfortunately, and he was just way before his time, of course, as we all know.
Well, printing water-based under plastisol is something Charlie taught the world how to do, and those that took it on, alas, a lot of people are seduced. New printers without proper curing equipment, they get seduced by water-based, or they get seduced by the
plastisol.
It's greener, it's cleaner.
Well, yeah.
Well, I tell you that David Stewart was very big on this. This is part of what why I loved him right away, is that he's immediately saying, no, I don't want anybody to pour water-based ink.
I know.
That's a commercial ink, and you need to dispose of it in a commercial manner. That's what I'm going to ask him to really talk about.
Yeah.
You know, sort of, he's a real chemist, and he's a real water-based chemist.
I'm with you. Biggest lie ever told is that water-based ink was safe. It's got anti-molding agents in it, and some of them have solvents in them, you know. And, I was always shocked when I started discovering all that, talking to our buddies, you know, Union Ink, Richard, and, you know, the chemists there, and discovering that it's not as safe as people think it is. Anyway, good topic. We should do that for sure.
Take this, for instance. I would I would, if I had to, I got paid some money, I would dip my finger into black plastisol ink, and I would lick it off. But I would never drink a drop of water-based ink because of all the other secret mildicides and
anti-molding agents. Whatever.
So, speaking of printing white ink, water-based style ink underneath plastisol, Atlas, I think you and I have talked about this in the past. Atlas is promoting their Ready Charge white discharge ink. So what's different about that? Well, first of all, I was kind of surprised I didn't pay enough attention to it when I first heard about it, that I'm sure Atlas has always distributed water-based ink. No, they're making it themselves, or someone's making it for them. But this is what's different about discharge. It's pre-mixed at the factory. You don't have to, you know, mix it with those smelly, rotten egg-smelling ZFS chemicals. And there's no real smell to this ink, or so I'm told. I haven't touched it, I haven't seen it, but 3 people asked me about it at the show, and so I prowled it a little bit. I called Atlas today and just to double check on it.
I've seen their websites. I'm good friends with those guys because they buy t-seps, and they were a big dealer for t-jets. So I know those guys, Paul and company. But I never thought of them as being a chemical company, and yet I saw all of a sudden on their website a couple months ago, discharge ink, you know, 1-year shelf life, blah blah blah. I'm thinking, maybe they are repackaging somebody else, but we got to find out about that because that's going to be a big topic.
They sell Matsui, so I always assumed it was just a Matsui thing and it wasn't that different. But the interesting thing again is the premix. But remember, attention, all discharge people. 90% of discharging is the shirt. The ink is not the complicated part. You have to have the proper reactive dyes that are critical to the system. The address for Atlas will be in the show notes.
Yeah. As you know, I've been Mr. Handyman. So the other night, I'm doing my bathtub caulking with some Dow Corning. silicone sealant. And one thing you don't know about me was, in my past life, I worked for a glass company, and I was in charge of the silicone sealants for building trades. And I sold Dow Corning. We were the Dow Corning distributor. We had a warehouse full of Dow Corning, and I was the guy that ordered it and went to the job sites. I have a real history with silicone sealants in my past life. But now you're saying that you go to the trade show, and there it is, Dow Corning, Inc. Same goop, different name probably. Anyway, tell me about this.
It certainly is kind of goopy, but the interesting thing is that the Dow Corning silicone textile inks are around $180 a gallon. Now that's expensive color changing area, but they work where nothing else works. Now, Lon Winters has been telling me about his experiments with silicone inks for maybe a couple of years. I know you said that you'd heard about it before.
I sure thought I saw it. I'm talking 4 or 5, 7 or 8 years ago at SGIA. Someone, maybe it wasn't Dow, showing silicone inks, and then it disappeared. One show, you know. But I'm thinking, you say 180 a gallon. If it's really good, and maybe you can use less of it, maybe then it's not that pricey. It's pricey, but in the grand scheme of things, performance wear, expensive garments, maybe less ink, maybe higher mesh. I don't know. I'm just talking here. Maybe it's not. Maybe plastisol is not that much different in the grand scheme. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Well, it's critical for these pesky polyester garments that are still the problem. Now, I know that Lon Winter introduced it at Long Beach, the Dow chemical inks. He did a demonstration printing shirts from Vapor Apparel on M&R equipment. I remember that because they did a lot of banner waving and did it. But so I paid attention because it was new and different. My friend Pierre Amnishi in Cleveland, he has also been experimenting with the Image Star silicone textile ink for almost a year. He's been testing it, working with Rob Coleman and Nastar. That ink is officially available now. That's why I'm mentioning it now. Image Star, it's what is it? IMS 357-52. I remember because of 357, and then I remember the 52 by rote. But it doesn't say Nasdar on it. It's an Image Star ink, but it says powered by Dow Corning. But when I looked for it this morning, it is not on the Source One website. I prowled it on the internet, and Image Star silicone textile ink is not on the internet anywhere. IMS 357-52 is not on the internet anywhere. So I trust my Nasdar buddies that it is officially available, but it's something to try.
Wonder if they would do samples. I mean, our friends at Union Ink and all those guys, for years, you could get a little, wouldn't be enough to do a great print, but you could get a sample. I'm just curious if they would do samples.
Well, I wonder if you go to Napa Valley and ask them for a sample of champagne, if you can get some.
Well, I know, but you'd think that to get market share and to kind of introduce yourself, you'd say, hey, here's our goop, and try a little, try one squeegee stroke worth, and see. So I don't know.
Well, it depends on whether or not you're a good Nasdar cut. I'm making jokes now.
No, but you're probably right, though. I think you're right.
If you're serious, I'll bet you that the Nasdar reps will know who to take it to, people that are doing the difficult, pesky polyesters.
Yeah, but you're right. The performance fabrics are the talk of the month, and they're going to be around. They're not going away. And so if they've got an ink that works better on that, then that's great. Maybe a big deal.
Now, Dow is new to screen printing, where Nasdar is a founding member of screen printing. Nasdar's been around for as long as there has been screen printing, as far as I'm concerned. But Dow Chemical does have technical updates at their website. The link will be in the show notes. You can download a sell sheet. Again, $180 a gallon. That's more like color change ink prices. They've also got a press release that you can read about Lon Winter and M&R and Vapor Apparel's instigation. They've also got a thing to sign up for information. So I signed up for the silicone newsletter. Also from Nasdar, I have a project that my girlfriend's daughter has roped me into, and I have to print ink on ceramic coasters for some big end of prohibition party that she's running. And of course she said, can you do coasters? And I said, sure, I can do coasters. And then on my way to Atlantic City, I get a text and say, oh, what I meant was ceramic coasters. So, so it's not so I'm not going over to Michael's art and a craft store and buying an 8-ounce container of black ink, I had to ask my NASDAR buddies, what should I do? Now, when I was at NASDAR, I apologize. I said the wrong thing. When I was at Lawson, I helped Glenn Kennedy print panels for the NASDAR, for the Lawson equipment. I've got it in my brain now. And, of course, we used an ADE series epoxy ink, and that was wicked stuff, but that would stick to anything. Somebody else told me, maybe it was Carl Busey. I did ask Carl, and I did get ADE, and I think he said also 5900 enamel plus will stick to anything. And so that's what I'll be using for ceramic. But when I discussed this with Mark Vasilanto, and he seems to be big in this podcast, he said, we don't use those epoxy inks anymore. We're printing our control panels with plastisol, and then we bake them, because they have the ability to bake them. And so
are you serious?
They're not printing with a nasty epoxy ink. They're printing with plastisol.
I got a Vastex press out. I'm going to go check that out because there's printing everywhere. Mark is real big on move this, move that. I mean, he must have 50 print locations on his press, so that's funny.
Well, when he was showing me the C1000, he said, "Hey, printed with plastisol." What?
I am blown away. I'm telling you what. Oh my God.
But again, he can cure it. He's an oven manufacturer, and he knows what he's doing when it comes to that sort of thing.
Hey, we're going to talk about people, but I'm curious, what shirt are you wearing? What's your chemical? What's it say?
Chemical babysitters.
Is that like a production manager in a shop, or what is that?
1981, San Diego. My great old friend Jonathan Walton, the late Jonathan Walton, he died in, I think, 1985. He was a youngster that had always had cancer. When I knew him, he knew when he was like 14 years old he had a cancer. He knew he would never make it to 30 years old. This, I believe, made him the happiest, carefree guy who could not be bullied. Why? Because he was going to die before he was 30. Could say, "John, can we stay a little? Can we work a little later? Or can you a little guilt work?" No, I'm going to the bars. Bye.
Hey.
So, but he was so much fun, the great Jonathan Walton. But Jonathan, in his screen room, had pinned up on the wall chemical babysitters, which is something that he cut out of the San Diego newspaper. I loved it. Chemical babysitters were people that were guarding hazardous chemicals. But knowing Richard Greaves and knowing Jonathan Walton, we immediately had to say, we need that on a T-shirt. It's also on the back, as you can see. So looks like I printed on the wrong side of the shirt. I don't remember why on there.
What do you get the test print?
But it was fun to be walking on the street wearing the chemical babysitters shirt, and some innocent victim would ask me, "What's that? What's chemical babysitters?" And I'd say, "It's a whole new scheme from Northern California. We take your baby in when you go to work. It's a daycare center. We give them a small injection, and they sleep until you come and pick them up. We wake them up. And the looks on people's faces. Ah!
I'm blown away. You're the trickster.
So, all right. So I was young in 1982.
All right. So people news. You ran the people out there. At trade shows, you hear who got fired, who got hired, who's left, who's moved on.
Brian Lassard, who I mentioned, had moved to MHM to work in their showroom. I don't know why, but he's back at Rutland. He'd come down to South Carolina to be with Rutland, or North Carolina to be with Rutland. He used to work for Rick Roth and was a part of the people that Rick Roth wrote articles in Printwear magazine about architects. And Rick Roth says that Brian Lassard is the best ink man he has ever known. He's back at Rutland, so congratulations to Rutland to get him back. Art Doby, Academy member, more than 30 years working at Safar. He had new cards because he now works at Chromaline. He left Safar around the holidays. And I had known because his data changed on LinkedIn, and he sent me a little note saying he got a new job at Chromaline. And, we were standing in an aisle, and I didn't really ask him what the details were, and so I don't really know what happened. But, gosh, 30 years. Well, that reminds me, John Deal of Dowfit. John Deal is an ex-SafeR guy, and he left SafeR maybe 2 years ago, maybe 1 year ago, and he went back to the family firm of Dowfit to work with his brother Mark at Dowfit in Detroit, right up the street, 20 minutes. The interesting story probably is Rick Roth of the Ink Kitchen and Mirror Image. He had hurt his head playing football, and he didn't feel so good over the holidays, and they finally figured it out, and he had to go in for brain trauma surgery where they actually had to cut open his head and do some major, that's major surgery. And he's not been able to lift anything or drive or fly anywhere. That's why he didn't go to Long Beach. But he was definitely in Atlantic City, drove down with the secret weapon.
Was he bandaged? Was he bandaged? I'm just curious.
No, he did not have a bandage. I bet you that most people would not even know. He's not supposed to pick anything up and not supposed to drive. So I'm sure the doctors will clear him any minute, and he'll be back in action traveling around. I think I told her he's stopping people in the eye and telling people, what are you doing here? So he's in much better shape. A man that I had never met in person, but had talked on the phone dozens of times, Larry Solomon from Victory Factory in Long Island. Larry was there. I introduced myself to him. Of course, we know each other because when I was a Yolano product manager, I talked to him often. And I think because he's close to Yolano, I think he's a pal of the company anyway. He always seemed to be getting better deals or good deals, or was eager to do deals with films that we sold, especially the inkjet films that we made at Yolano. But what he really wanted to talk about, and Al Gershow, of the president of Yolano, also wanted to talk about, was the unrespected league of small poster printers in the greater New York area. Larry told me that he's literally doing hundreds of frames a month for people that are doing classes where artists come in, they rent a studio, or they work in one of the studios, what would be called an atelier in the past, and they print their posters, and they're doing a bang-up business of screen making for the poster crowd.
Who knew?
So they're supplying with lots of screens for supplies. So they're mentioning Warhol and things like that, but I think that an art area, the New York art crowd, you're always going to be people at Pratt. There's got to be people that are taking screen making or screen printing classes at Pratt, but I'll bet you, because I've gone to some of those kind of classes and taught myself, that they teach you more about, in fact, Larry said this, they teach you more about the emotion. They're teaching you about the art, but they just say, here, this is how you coat. You put some of this stuff, that's a technical term. They put some of this stuff with the thing, and you let it dry, and then you get the lamp over, and then you expose it with the 250-watt photo flood, and that's
it's all about the art, not about the process.
Exactly.
I always call it goop. It's this goop. So.
Oh, goop.
Yeah.
Now that's a technical term that I'm not really familiar with.
Yeah.
Seminars. One of the reasons I went to Atlantic City. Pierre Yamnishi and I did the Variables Geek seminar that we did in Long Beach. I was the science guy, and Pierre was the serial entrepreneur. He talked about the business part, productivity, and I would talk about the real science, explaining the variables of screen printing, of which, of course, I breezed through it. And the 90-minute seminar that we're required to do, I did it in probably 140, 150 minutes. And there
was nobody following you. There was no speakers after you in the room.
Hey, only one man left at 90 minutes when we told people. Only one person left out of 45 people.
Yeah.
So, ka-ching.
That's a lot of people, too, for a seminar. You were on Sunday again.
Sunday at 10:30. The poor man that's the guard at the door, he's holding up his green sign, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and I've given him the okay. We're not even halfway done.
Come back in 30 minutes with another sign.
And the lady came in to collect the seminar things, and this lady was not as much fun as the as
was
the man who
Atlantic
was
City.
she's giving me the arms crossed and the I need the seminar handouts.
Yeah.
I need the evaluation sheets. So we stopped. People turned in their evaluations. I explained the 5 is where you just circle the 5.
Just give us time.
No, I don't know. So we did that, and then we carried on. Again, only one person left. We did have to quit when the AV guys showed up. They looked like they were union men and not about to listen to
in
my
Atlantic
BS.
City, you don't screw with those guys. They're on a
So during this seminar, I do one little bit. I have a bit where I'm talking about how much pressure it takes to transfer ink. And part of it is I say, look, I've got a little Ebola on my finger, and I wanted to a cute girl, because I'm always paying attention to the cute women in the I can't say girl, because chicks don't like it when you call them girls. And boom, boom, boom. You're supposed to laugh a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Yes, okay, all right. You may cut that out later.
No,
right,
I'm
doing old Jeffrey
I was
jokes.
plugging
What I'm doing.
I was plugging it in. I'd say I probably call women girls, so I was plugging it in as you were saying. I think, I got to quit doing that. So.
I need the rim shot here.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a very nice girl in the a fine woman who I go up and I touch her shirt and I'm transferring the Ebola with one little touch, which represents how much force it takes to actually transfer ink. Because once it sticks to the shirt, look down at your pants. Did it take any effort to get that red ink 9 inches from the bottom of your shoes? Well, later on, she comes up to me. Do you know who I am? And now when a girl comes up to me and says, do you know what? Do you remember me? And I go, you do look familiar.
But you have clothes on.
I don't remember. And then she said, I'm coming back with Mauricio. So, no, I don't know. I only know one Mauricio in my life. It's Mauricio from California. And she comes back and, they look familiar. And they'd come to my seminar, and they were raging fans from a seminar that I'd done at Tech Support in Pittsburgh when I worked at And when I saw the name, ABBA Designs in Virginia, I do remember them, but we'd never done any business. But I'm telling you, my heart skipped a beat. I'm coming back with Mauricio. So,
Does he have a gun?
The real success of a seminar is when they stay after and they ask questions. And the big question, the problem question, which I'm putting out to everybody because I need to put this out for crowdsourcing, is that one guy that came up, he was telling us about performance wear. There it is again, performance wear that had 2 flashes in it, maybe only 1 flash, but they'd print and, you stick the shirt to the platen, they'd print, and after the flash, the shirt would no longer stick to the platen. Well, what do you mean? They'd then circle around, they'd put a brand new shirt, a new shirt will stick to the platen, but after flash, the shirt is rejecting the adhesive, the tape. So this guy says, it doesn't happen with the Gildan, but it happens with this brand. And I don't remember what brand it is. I can't really help, but it was the most unusual question I'd heard in an awful long time, a reaction. But these coated fibers, I'm sure, are somehow giving off the aura, because I'll bet you that coated fiber that is what performance stuff is all about, whether it's that Hanes temperature X shirt or something. It's a coating, and is that coming off, or that is rejecting ink or something? That's what they're made to do. So I'd never heard it before. It's just an interesting query.
Well, then they're going to come out with the spray tack for the performance wear that's $100 a can because they can, and people will buy it. But it's interesting, though. I mean, we need to probably explore that. I don't print anymore other than during class, so I don't use performance wear. You're in the field more than I am now, but you don't print. And so we need to probably get somebody on that's really in the trenches every day doing printing with performance wear and find out more about this.
There were, in the seminars, there were 2 polyester performance wear migration or dye migration seminars. One was by Rick Davis of Triangle Ink, and he did one on Saturday. And then Alan Howe was just before us, Alan Howe from Performance of Tech Support of Pittsburgh. And these were both well received. Again, Alan had 25 people in his seminar. Both of these guys are 25-year veterans, and I think this is the new troublesome. It's going to turn, this is an industrial problem. It isn't something that is easily solved. It's a chemical problem that's quite complicated. The Shirtboard Dinner. Pierre Yamnishi and Rich Hoffman of M&R sponsor a dinner this year again. Like last year, it was at Angelo's. 20 people showed up, and it was a very, very nice crowd. Now, last year, I had a different table at 2014 for the Shirtboard Dinner, and I missed the stories that Rich Hoffman told. And so when Rich came in, I didn't think that he was going to be at this particular thing. He's sitting over there at a round table, and I didn't waste time this time. This time I sat right next to him. So when you say that I'm
you were his first tech call. You guys have history. You bonded, a long time ago. So.
But interestingly enough, I did have 20 minutes of just he and I talking together because there was nobody in a couple of seats next to us. So we really, I got to talk to him, and I probably haven't talked that quietly with him in such a long time. So the things that he covered were real, entertaining, dinner table kind of stuff. Now, he told me about the worst shipping congestion or water shipping congestion that we've had more than a decade because of the 9-month labor standoff on the West Coast that was settled in February. No, I hadn't heard a thing about that. But for industrial people, when I started to look it up on the internet on my phone later on that day,
big deal.
It was a huge deal. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about how he can't get motors from Italy. He can't get supplies that he needs because boats are backed up on the West Coast. And then when they started to reroute things through the Panama Canal, even Florida and Louisiana and Norfolk were all clogged up because of the 9-month shortages or the 9-month shutdowns that they were having on the West Coast. So that's just an interesting tidbit. Perhaps the most interesting thing that he talked about was that he's building a new plant. It's not locked in yet. It's not determined, but he's found a Philips factory. Philips, the Dutch industrial company. They've left a factory about 9 miles north of his Glen Ellen factory where they have big buildings now. That's where I actually worked when I worked with M&R. And they're merging it with the building that they got from Newark in Niles. They want to merge both of those buildings into a much larger, not really a larger building, but it's larger. And they're buying all new equipment, but it's got to be approved by Tuesday, today, that when we're recording this. He should have seen a virtual diagram from the industrial people that are working for him that are going to show him exactly where it's going to be, and he will probably be signing contracts this week. He wants to have it done by October. This is a Herculean effort if I ever heard it. I've had to move shops in the past, and to move M&R into a new building in only 9 months is quite the project. Not 9 months, it's like 7 months or whatever. So he told me 9 months. He told me October. That's the goal, but we'll see.
Now you told me that he said that they were really kicking out the autos, so that they're selling the heck out of stuff and large quantities to some people.
I'm not writing down these numbers because I don't know, it just seems like it's secret stuff, but I just told things that he told me that I can actually remember. But he's talking about we sell 4 strikers a week. Strikers are their very large new oval-shaped machine that when he's doing things, especially overseas, that he's selling 20 or 30 Challenger 3s at a time. So he is doing huge business. Business is just booming for him, and
You think it's M&R or the industry? I mean, I'm curious if MHM is doing the same. I'm just curious if it's just booming for everybody.
I have no knowledge of what what MHM might do, so I just can't say. I heard just great things.
If it's just good news for all of us that it's just booming,
Well, a lot of it is overseas, though. He talked in detail about plans for a secret project in a secret country. He would not tell us where it was, but he's working on a plan for a robotic printing factory in which almost everything is done with robots, not a lot of humans. So they're just manipulating or leveraging what robots can do. For years, he's had things that were working on automatic takeoff and automatic putting on of the shirt. I dug up an article from, I think it was T-Shirt Retailer, which I had up on the screen. I'll put the link to it in the show notes. When we were talking about, not me, but Mark Coudre's in it, Dave Jaffa is in it, talking about whether we can automate the removal or the adding of textiles onto a machine. He also talked about the Ningbo knitting factory in China, where Mark Gervais is just, I think he has like 700 machines or something ungodly like that. But just how big it took 3 hours just to walk through the plants, just enormous. Mark Gervais has just done some amazing thing. Probably the most important printer in the world now because of the volume of stuff that he does for Ningbo in China. On a lighter note or a less dramatic note, Sean Mackey, who I met at last year's dinner of Scrimshaw in New York, he was there. But I like Shane. He calls me a couple of times and asks me some questions, and is definitely a fan. But it's his better half, Leanne, who I like much better. Leanne is an attorney, but also a roller derby girl, and I like derby girls.
I don't think those two words go together, do they? Attorney and roller derby. I guess everybody has their after hours life,
Mild-mannered and firm until you get her out on the course. Her roller name is Gwyn Animals Attack. I'm sorry, I bangled it up. Gwyn Animals Attack. And of course that's animal. Gwyn Animals Attack.
Oh, okay.
A three-name thing. So it took me 3 times to get.
Don't bump me or I'll sue you, right?
Well, you got to be rough and tough. You got to be able to get up. But remember, it's just her name is Leanne, and there's animal in there, so I assume that's where that comes from. But I had sympathy for her because Shane brings her down to these events, but she doesn't know. She's not that interested in screen printing. I've had things to talk about because my favorite roller derby person, and I have two favorite roller derby people. Lynn Scream Printer Hooley from Replica Chicago. She and Jeremy Hooley have a terrific shop. They've just expanded, and she's my favorite roller derby person. She's with the Outfit, and you don't mess with her either. I remember that Lynn was at a seminar in Indianapolis, and she's another beautiful woman that I'm looking out there. And then later on, after the show, she comes up to ask questions and bringing along this guy with her with all those tattoos and such.
Oh, man.
The roller derby ladies that bring their husbands along with them, that's no fun. But so Leanne Attack, the animal, I had sympathy for her as she sat next to us at dinner listening to these detailed screen printing chatter. But in a quiet moment, I told her that, there's all kinds of ways that we can really scare Shane if you want to. So she was taking notes as I told her things that she can bring up in conversations to give Shane nightmares when she needs to punish him. And it was just things like, bring this up in conversation, coefficient of expansion of aluminum. Now, when you say that, no one will know what you mean. But you say, no, I don't think you've taken into consideration the coefficient of expansion of aluminum. And then when someone says, well, what do you mean by that? If you don't know, and turn and leave so you can go have some snacks at the bar or something like that. So my other favorite thing to irritate screen makers is that take your screen, put it flat on the glass. Now press down on the middle. See that off contact distance? And most people, I've never met anyone who actually, that wasn't Newman trained, for instance, that really understood that the four corners of a screen are touching, but the tension on the frame makes the members bend, and you can slip a piece of paper or a business card underneath the frame, but you can also press down because there's off contact where the positive is. This is why you've got to have vacuum. So you pull the mesh down onto the glass. But I think what everybody did enjoy was the warp and weft. How do you tell the warp and weft? These are old jokes. You'll know this. The warp is from Star Trek. The threads in the mesh.
I remember this.
If it's all right. From Star Trek, you remember the warp, and so you think, whoosh, long shooting Starship Enterprise at light speed at warp drive. Those are the long threads. And then you have the weft and white. So the shuttle, when you're weaving, goes weft and white, weft and white,
I don't
weft
think I
and
remembered
white.
it that way. There was something else that was a similar
I
story.
don't care how.
Yeah.
This is my story.
I know. It's a good story, though. I like it. I'll use that one instead, for sure.
It's the warp that gets bent. It's the weft and white that those threads are actually straight until you put tension on it. Now, I know a lot of people have also disturbed lots of screen makers because they'll go, well, which threads are kinked and which ones aren't? And are the holes in the mesh, are they square or are they a rectangle? And I know Joe Clark, my good friend Joe Clark, has certainly disturbed and given nightmares to an awful lot of screen makers with those class of questions.
I'm sure he has, yes, with charts and graphs.
Now, again, at this dinner, a lot of the chatter was about DTG online guys. These farms of DTG, I'm calling them farms, these people like Zazzle, Teespring, Custom Ink, Gear Launch, Shirt Magic, these people are popping up like mushrooms because of what, just take Custom Ink and Gear Launch, what they've shown the world, how you can make money online. And the online is the biggest sea change that we've seen because you're not going through ASI distributors when you can get money on the web. And people are paying $25 for one color shirts. Who'd have thunk?
I had someone today, true story, one of my screen print customers, student from 20 years ago, has a brother machine, and when people will come in and want 3 or 4 shirts, he charges them $40 a shirt. It's a 20, and that's what I was thinking. Wow, I never really thought about what people would charge for 1 or 2 or 3, but he's for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, $40. You want it, great. If you don't want it, we're okay with that too. And he says I get it all day long. $40 a shirt. Anyway,
they're better salesmen than we are. Now, the big splash for me was the Dream Junction. The Dream Junction in Santa Clara. There were a couple of booths away from the Ink Kitchen, and a guy from the Dream Junction had stopped by because he was a friend of Rick Roth. He'd talked to Rick Roth on the telephone, and he dropped off his card at the Ink Kitchen and said, "Where's Rick?" And so we didn't know who the Dream Junction was because they had a big booth. I'll bet you it was 40 feet with basically nothing in it except for a couple of guys with lots of tattoos. And so
just a big sign.
They were a mystery.
Just a big sign.
Right. Just a big background, and I didn't pay any attention to them because who knows what they were, but I did not know that they were a farm with 40 Cornette Avalanche 1000s in them.
Wow. Millions of dollars
40
for the machines, yeah.
Cornette. And the customers that they're interested in dealing with are people that can supply them with 200 shirts a day around the clock. So that's 1,400 shirts a week. If you want to be a customer, you got to have that kind of volume. And they got 40 machines, so obviously there are people. I don't know what they're doing, but I'm impressed. Now in the DTG, the cool, clever thing is that we've all heard of Teespring, I assume. But Rick Roth told me that his friend, that is the man that started Gear Launch, he told me that his friend's name is Thatcher Spring. Teespring.
But no relation?
Thatcher Spring. Got nothing to do with Teespring at all. And his company is called Gear Launch. So there's our tidbit, our query, or our trivia tidbit for the night.
It's a big deal. I talked to somebody the other day that had 36 machines. It was kind of new, and multiple locations, they've, plants around the country, 36 DTG machines doing a ton of wholesale, I would call it wholesale contract printing. They would do the whole thing for like the end user, but they also contract printed for screeners and for people that wanted to own a DTG machine. That's a whole market springing up.
So when Rich Hoffman left, he paid the bill and left. He was only there for about a half an hour and paid the bill and left. Alan House sat next to me, and we talked about things, but he lives near me, so I talk to him on a regular basis. But he asked me who made the first automatic textile press, the multi-color textile press. And, I hadn't really thought about it. I came into the business in 1979, you were, before then you'd already written the how-to book. Do you know who you think made the first automatic textile press?
Actually, I have no idea because in those years I was a manual printer, although I had some V-series flatbeds for doing transfers, so I had those were for me. Who made the V-series? I want to say not Advance. Was it a Milwaukee company? M and something.
I've never heard of the B series.
Oh, V.
I've never heard of the B series.
V as in Victor. It was
that was M&M up in Oshkosh.
M&M. Thank you very much.
M&M.
I had a couple of M&Ms. That was, in my past life, but I didn't have any flatbed. I didn't have any autos then. I remember when I was a manual printer, if you owned either on a Vastex or you owned a Richardson. I mean, that were the two manual presses that were out there. Bill Richardson's press with a little tiny, like a little spring below it, and then Vastex with their hold down, like we talked earlier, and it seemed like a lot of work, but that was it. But I don't know who made the first automatic. You must know something about that, though. You're a good detective.
Well, I didn't know, so I went around and asked. Now, the first place I went was Vastex, and because I know that they patented the first manual multicolor textile press, and Mark told me that, Mark at Vastex told me that it was actually called the Double Lazy Susan. That was what was in the patent. And what was unique about it also was that it had mechanical hold downs, which they just called mechanical hold downs. Now we call those jacket hold downs, whereas now we've invented, or we use textile or tack adhesives to hold the shirt in place so it doesn't move. While we were talking, Charlie Taublieb comes into the booth, and he had great stories about his first press, which was a manual that he bought from Vastex. But he actually bought it through Advanced Process Supply in Chicago because they were a distributor for Vastex. They weren't making equipment yet at that level and didn't have a manual press. But Charlie says that after several 2,000 shirt orders, he immediately bought an oval because he just didn't want to do manuals that much anymore, but it was fun. Now, in the booth, Mark called over his mother, Mrs. Vasilantone. She was called over to fill in.
You call her Mrs. I call her Fanny because it was always years ago. In the early days, it was Fanny and Mike, and occasionally you'd see Mark with as we talked about earlier. But it was Fanny and Mike, and they were the guys. So anyway, so Fanny and I are like that. But anyway, she came by and told you
she came by and I got a good greeting. How are you? Good to see you. You're walking so much better now. Yeah. So I feel good that she even remembers who I was. So she filled in some of the blanks, but mostly she was filling in the stories about how he and her husband, we did this and we had to fight with these guys, and then Advance, we were mad at Advance because they came out with the press, and just good stories. I'll have to have. She would be a great interview. I'll have to try and
so right.
Get Mark and his mother to do a Skype interview. But what we're really laughing about, because we gathered a little tiny group around, we were laughing as she told stories about the problems dealing with beeswax that they used to sell to hold shirts on the platens, and Mark somehow getting stuck together, putting beeswax in cups that they sold. And I've actually forgotten the story. We'll have to get Mark to actually tell us that story because I was laughing. I was clearly laughing.
Maybe there wasn't any spray adhesive back then. I'm just thinking back in the mid 60s.
Watered down Elmer's glue. I'm sure it grew.
Yeah.
There's a story. There's a history story there somehow. So we got to get Guido to work on that for the after World War II book.
So who made the first autos? Do we know?
Well, I walked. I asked quite a few other people, and I got little tidbits back and forth. But when I asked Jeff Baxter, remember Jeff Baxter knew Jeffrey Gittimer before I did. He knew him when he was just a 22-year-old kid, and I forget how Baxter actually knew Gittimer, but he knew him way before he knew me because they're both from Indiana or something, or they were in Indiana together. They printed scarves together at U.S. Scarf. Jeffrey was a consultant or a salesman for U.S. Scarf, and Baxter was there. He had a lot of other jobs, but it was Baxter that helped him get a job at Logo 7, just as a lowly guy, but he rose very quickly.
Yeah, that's where I met Jeff, I think, was actually with Logo 7. Maybe it's Harlequin, I'm not sure.
Jeff also got, Jeff Gittimer got Jeff Baxter the job at Advance because Jeff Gittimer is the guy that really inspired Mel and Shell Green to make the Aero multi. He and Duke Dalton got him to make the Aero multi-printer. But when I asked Baxter, it was just like he'd been reading a book about it yesterday. He said, oh, no, it was Allison Manufacturing in Allentown, Pennsylvania that had the first automatics. They probably made them in 1947. Some of those Allison machines are still around. And so,
but for their own use. I mean, they made, this was not a company, Allison, the pajama makers or whatever. They made their own for their own in-house, not for resale. I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't think.
Allison was a giant in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then when they were bought by Beatrice, and I really don't know what happened to them. I just because I don't know, but the Allison name in the early 80s was huge. So I can see how they had the first ones, and they made them for themselves. But it was very clear that Dave Jaffe's father at Precision developed the oval, and that would be in maybe the mid-60s or very early 70s. And it was Hank Bubley at Advance who made the first Cameo multi-printer. But Precision was the first with the real textile machine that could be sold to people. And it was a small machine. I loved the starter oval. You could bring that in on a truck, and literally 1 hour after you unloaded off the truck, you could be printing shirts with that because it came on its own pallet. We need more starter machines like that. And that was the dinner table question that finished off my trip. Pierre and I got back in his car and drove 10 hours back to Cleveland, and I dived into the bed at his house at midnight.
That's so fun.
It was a long day for us.
I'm sorry I missed it. I saw that some pictures of other people having their dinners, and I've always had dinners, and I remember me picking up the tab for all the people that wanted to come and have dinner and stuff. And I was always a craps player, so I missed kind of going to the craps tables and stuff. I don't miss the cold. You haven't commented on the cold, so it must not have been so bad there.
I didn't say there was one lady with a mask. I just remember her because she stuck out. But man, I stayed at the beach with Jeff Proctor. And
is that the name of the place? At the beach? At the beach?
No. It's the Atlantic Palace.
I've been there. I don't think it's not like the Trump, but I don't know if I've been there.
It's on New York. It's right next to Ripley's, believe it or not. So it's like 30 stories high.
I think I've stayed there. I remember I stayed somewhere where it was right across the street from Ripley's. Anyway,
that would be it.
But they don't run rooms by the hour there, so you're probably okay. Well, maybe they do. I don't know.
No. By the weekend is what we rented it for. Or Jeff Proctor rents it, and I get to sleep on the couch.
I didn't know you stayed with Proctor. You hadn't mentioned that. So anyway, hey, it was a good report. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sorry I missed the show. And next year I got to go. We got to do some of these interviews though. So that's our show.
I think it's good. Thanks very much for watching.
That's it, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.